FCI Redstone, Education Wing, Classroom C. The room was loud until an old man walked in with a metal tray held upright like a quiet flag. He was thin, a little stooped, calm in a way that didn't belong here. He set the tray on the desk edge and stood still. "Wrong room, Grandpa," a voice called. "Nursing homes that way." Cade Sutter drifted from the back row with his hands in his pockets and a smile that dared the room to laugh. "Seat tax first," he said, "or the kitchen line collects." The laughter rose. The old man didn't laugh. A South Line kid reached to flick the tray off balance. The old man moved once. His forearm turned. His thumb pinned the web of the boy's hand. The wrist folded. The chair caught him before pride did. The tray stayed upright, ringing a thin note of metal, straight as a horizon that refused to tilt. Silence hit like a door closing. This is where the story turns. Before we follow them down that stairwell, take a moment to like this video, hit subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, back to Redstone. Ms. Lynn Ortega raised one palm. "Eyes down. We're in class." Cade's smile didn't move. Around Redstone, Cade is the shot caller for this wing, the man who polices Classroom C on behalf of an inmate alliance called the Accord. They split the block like a map. Southline crew, Cade's partners, control the corridor from chapel to kitchen, and the kitchen line itself. They collect quietly. Most men pay. The old man had not. His name was Elias Porter. Calm. He touched the tray with a fingertip and let the room settle around him. His breath stayed even. The room began to borrow his tempo. At Redstone, the saying goes, fights aren't about life or death. They're about who owns the room. Cade glanced toward the hallway that feeds the chapel antechamber, the narrow stair, and the kitchen line at the top of the hour. 3 choke points. South Line turf. Perfect for an audience. "Class can move," he said lightly. "Field trips are educational." No one moved. The kid with the shaved widow's peak stared at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. 2 men in khaki slid toward the door to carry the rumor. That's how rooms turn here. A small story leaves and a larger one walks back in. A name traveled under the breath of the class. Rex Anvil Mercer, the de facto chair of the Accord. Rex doesn't enter classrooms. Rex chooses stages and hours and lets other men warm up the crowd. Elias didn't look toward the door. He set the tray a fraction closer to the desk lip, as if measuring the edge on behalf of everyone else. He stood in stillness that made motion look wasteful. He gave the room nothing to push against. "Seat tax is simple," Cade said, voice low for the first 2 rows. "You pay to sit? Or you read on the line?" Ms. Ortega stayed in the aisle, teacher before warden. "We're reading," she said. The words put legs back under a few chairs. Somewhere beyond the clock, ductwork sighed. Far off, a pot knocked metal in the kitchen. The hour gathered itself. Elias's stillness didn't brag. It warned. He had come to keep the room from belonging to noise. He had come to show that balance decides who falls. A shoulder brushed him on the way past, searching for a wall. He let it pass into space and die without a witness. A pen rolled, tapped a desk leg, and stopped as if it had decided to listen. Cade rocked back toward the door with 2 South Line shadows, the grin you wear when you think the crowd is already yours. "Top of the hour," he said. "Kitchen's got good acoustics." If Redstone had a weather report, it would call for metal and pressure. The corridor would thicken. Chapel antechamber to stair to kitchen line. 3 turns, 3 chances to prove who names the room. Elias looked at the tray the way a man looks at a compass. Intake flashed across the mind like a short film. Steel doors, a weigh-in, a form stamped wire fraud, a signature where a promise crossed a line. Enough. The rest belonged to later. The map that mattered was here. This class, that corridor, those stairs, the line. The fluorescent steadied. The men didn't. Cade paused in the doorway, counting seconds, the way fighters count steps. "Field trip," he said brightly. "Educational outcomes." No one laughed. The tray waited, upright and quiet as a vow. The camera bubble watched nobody in particular. And the old man most men had filed under breakable stood very still and let the hour pick him up. Toward the chapel antechamber, toward the stair, toward the steel that would sing when it was time. Lights out at Redstone is never dark. It is a low hum and a slow river of exit signs, the thin glow that leaks through door slits, the scrape of a bunk shifting and then pretending it never moved. The air smells like detergent, old metal, and the kind of tired that knows your name. Elias Porter folds his blanket until the corners meet, squares the pillow, and lines his shoes heel to heel. The tray from class rests upright between locker and wall like a kept promise. He sits on the bunk and listens. Blocks have rhythms. When jokes die and coughs get counted, the rules speak in whispers. They speak now. "Seat tax, classroom C," someone says 2 rows down. "Kitchen line, top of the hour," another answers. "Grandpa made Cade look dumb," a third mutters, half impressed, half afraid. "South line will make him read where the pans can clap." Elias reaches under his pillow and pulls a tattered paperback, spine mended with tape. The sun-bleached cover reads, "Applied Mechanics. Levers and hinges." He tilts the pages toward the slit of corridor light and studies a simple sketch. Force at the hinge, not the door. Turn what turns the whole. His thumb rests on the diagram while he thinks about wrists and chairs, and how a room changes angle when you touch the right point. A shape settles on the edge of the neighboring bunk. A young voice, careful, not a challenge. "That's a heavy book for a place like this." Elias looks up enough to acknowledge, not enough to make a spectacle. The kid from class, Noah, leans in the dim like a question mark drawn by a steady hand. "It's lighter than the mistakes it can prevent," Elias says. Noah huffs a laugh that doesn't carry. "Most guys here use their heads on doors," he says. "I've got the headache to prove it." "Balance chooses who falls," Elias says. "If you move the hinge, the door closes itself." Noah studies the page as if the sketch might apologize for something. "You didn't pay them," he says after a beat. "Seat tax for classroom C. Cade checks names. South line runs the corridor and the line. They collect the quiet way until someone makes noise." "I heard them ask," Elias says. "They'll ask harder," Noah says. "At the line. They like an audience. It's not about eating. It's about who writes the breath of the crowd." He gives the rest in one clean piece, the way a man burned learns to hand over the match. "South line runs chapel to kitchen. 3 choke points. The antechamber pinches you. The stair rolls you. The kitchen line finishes you. They don't choose who eats, just who waits where. You cut that breath. You cut their money." A cart rattles somewhere far off. A guard's radio pops and fades. The dorm exhales together, then pretends it didn't. Elias closes the book and smooths the taped spine. "Why are you here?" Noah asks, then lifts a palm as if to cancel the question. "You don't have to say. It's just, you don't move like men your age." "I crossed a line to keep a promise," Elias says. The paper calls it one thing. The promise calls it another. The rest can wait for a quieter room. Rooms get quiet, Noah says. Usually after they get loud first. They can get quiet because someone listens, Elias says. Loud runs out of breath. Noah nods, a small motion that feels like a decision. Cade smiles like everything is a joke, he says softly. But he files the answers. Southline writes the roots. And there's Rex Mercer, Anvil. You won't see him until he thinks you're worth seeing. A name is a handle, Elias says. You don't have to pull it hard. Noah glances at the tray by the locker. You're going to show up, he says, half dread, half hope. It's class, Elias says. If they insist on a field trip, we'll make it educational. They'll try to make you pick a side. There is a side where the room belongs to balance, Elias says. Anyone can stand there. Noah smiles into the dark. If you make it quiet, he says, some of us might finally hear ourselves think. That is the point, Elias says. He slides the book back under the pillow and lies down on his back, hands open on the blanket. The dorm settles by degrees. The exit sign hums like a small engine that never shuts off. Somewhere far away, a pan taps metal, one clear note that says morning will bring an audience. Elias keeps his breathing even without counting it. He draws the map behind his eyes the way a carpenter reads grain. Classroom C to the corridor, corridor to the chapel antechamber, antechamber to the stair, stair to the kitchen line. 3 turns. 3 places to move the hinge instead of the door, 3 chances to change who the room belongs to. He closes his eyes. The hour drifts closer like a tide you can hear, but cannot hurry. The tray stands where he left it, quiet as a vow. And the dorm, not knowing why, begins to match the pace of a man who came here to make noise run out of breath. Morning at Redstone arrives as a checklist. Count, doors, roll call, tokens. In classroom C, a cardboard box sits on a student desk with a spiral notebook and a plastic tray. A Southline runner, clean nails, empty stare, palms each kitchen token and scratches a mark. No speech, no receipt. That is the seat tax. Noah pays. 2 men after him pay without looking up. When Elias reaches the table, the runner's hand hangs open for a payment that isn't coming. Name, the runner says. Elias, he answers and keeps walking. Elias sits. No glare, no speech. He gives the room nothing to push against. A thin ripple follows. Chairs nudge, breath shortens, attention leans toward the door like iron to a magnet. Ms. Lynn Ortega stands at the front with a stack of workbooks. Her thumb rests near the recessed emergency button under the ledge. A habit, not a threat. If noise hardens into violence, she will press and live with the paperwork. Until then, she teaches. Silent reading, 15 minutes, she says, calm, pitched to carry. She sets a workbook on Elias's desk, the same way she sets one on every desk. Your work stands on your name, not on tokens, she adds for the whole room. 2 men who have never been called by their names in a classroom blink. She pins a notice from the program office to the whiteboard. Attendance is voluntary. No fees may be solicited by staff or inmates. She does not glance at the box. She pins it anyway. Not a fight. A stake in the ground. The fluorescent over the board flickers once, then steadies. Lieutenant Damon Carver appears in the doorway with a clipboard and an expression that wastes nobody's time. He clocks the box, the notebook, the runner's deadpan, the chairs pivoting toward the hall. He knows this theater. The Accord rents space inside the rules and calls it order. Administration calls it cooperation until the weather changes. His eyes land on Elias, Thin, still, no token, no argument. He writes one line, "Education wing warming, chapel corridor next." Then he keys his radio, not an alarm, but a forecast. Top of the hour. Hold the side doors. South line shifts as if the paper on the board weighed more than ink. The runner drifts the box toward the threshold. Another takes the chair nearest the hall. A third posts by the window. They are building a funnel, chapel antechamber, stairwell, kitchen line. 3 choke points, 3 acts, one ending they believe is theirs. Ortega steps to the door as if checking corridor traffic, planting herself between the box and the class. Her thumb stays near the button. Her breathing finds a lower gear. She has seen bluffers freeze and bullies crow. She has not often seen a 75-year-old make a room obey without a word. Respect rises before she can name it. Elias aligns the workbook to the desk edge, adjusts his seat a finger's width to keep his center true, and lifts a pen the way you lift a thought. He is not performing calm, he is using it. Men notice, not with applause but with small corrections. A lifer's jaw unclenches. A short timer drops his shoulders. Noah's breath evens. A South Line man stands, stretches, leaves as if bored. Another replaces him 2 heartbeats later. In the window glass, silhouettes stack in the corridor, runners claiming squares long before any capture. The stage is moving to the hall, where policy can pretend not to notice until it must. Chairs scrape, then stop, embarrassed by their own noise. The fluorescent stays steady. The hum holds. 10 minutes left, Ortega says. Make them count. Elias returns the pen to its groove and lays his palms flat. Years of teaching fists to stop before faces. Years of guiding breath to arrive before words. He does not look like he belongs here. He looks like a man who intends to make the room belong to something other than noise. Southline doesn't speak. They just adjust the room by quarter inches, angles, sight lines, exits. The runner at the threshold lifts the box an inch, as if it floats better near trouble. Outside, footsteps gather and pass, the corridor slowly thickening toward the hour Carver named. Ortega watches the class as a whole, then the few who matter, then the old man who has given her 15 minutes she did not have yesterday. Her thumb eases a hair off the button, not off alert, off panic. She can feel the room borrowing his rhythm and for now returning it to her lesson. Unwritten rules write themselves again. Tokens, boxes, nods, staged corridors. Underneath, a quieter rule takes shape, one you can feel but not quote. When balance holds, noise must go spend itself elsewhere. The minute hand climbs. The funnel waits. And for 15 borrowed minutes, Classroom C belongs to voice instead of volume. The hallway outside Classroom C breathes between bells. When the minute hand tips, Miss Ortega releases the class in 2s. Elias waits for the second wave, tray vertical at his side, Noah at his shoulder. Ahead, the chapel antechamber glows with stained glass. 2 silhouettes detach from the doorway. Then, 2 more. Cold chapel crew, faces blank, hands quiet. They spread across the threshold with the etiquette of ushers and the intention of bouncers. Behind them, the chapel door stands half open. A brass rail catches blue and red from the panes above. "Field trip ends here," one says. Noah shifts, but Elias touches his sleeve. Stillness first. He steps to the line where tile becomes carpet and feels the floor give. The first man tries the easy test, shoulder through space. Elias turns a half step and lets him pass into nothing until the man stops himself. No shove, just a pause that tastes like doubt. The second man shows a blade, a paring knife made for honest work. It glints under the red-blue wash. Elias lifts his left hand into a bridge, palm soft, thumb away. The blade comes forward, the bridge meets the wrist. A breath later, the knife belongs to the floor, not the room. It lands on the carpet with a sound that should be small and isn't. "Pick it up," someone whispers. "No," says the man who dropped it, surprised to hear his own voice obey. They try a new angle. The third man cuts right for Noah. Elias is already there, not with speed, but with position. He turns the elbow a careful inch and lays his forearm along the bicep, a shelf that redirects without accusation. The man discovers the brass rail with his ribs and stops because brass is honest. He will bruise where he needs the lesson and nowhere else. "Keep moving," says a voice behind the crew, Cade's voice, amused, assessing. "Chapel's busy. Stairs waiting." Elias nods, and he and Noah slide forward. Cold Chapel shifts like a gate that didn't know it could open. One steps in again, testing pride. Elias meets him with the same bridge and a thumb on the knuckle, a hinge for a door that shouldn't be slammed. The man sits, not hard, onto the lip of the step and discovers he has no argument with gravity today. Noah's breath has edges. Elias lets his own smooth them. He doesn't count. He allows. Red and blue swim along the ceiling. "Old man," Cade says from the side pews, "you can pass, but the stair keeps score." "The stair keeps balance," Elias says. Cade grins. "Then we'll see who tips it." He motions, and two more file in from the corridor, Southline shadows, drafted to Cold Chapel's choir. The fourth man feints for the tray, fingers pinching the rim. Elias lets him feel the weight, then lifts the tray a finger's width so the grasp empties itself. The man holds air and drops the pretense. "Why the tray?" he asks, before he can stop himself. "It tells the room where level lives," Elias says. They try pressure instead of tricks. Two step together, a shoulder and hip wave meant to carry Elias and Noah back into the crowd. Elias accepts the first shoulder with the bridge and lets it pass. He interrupts the second with a gentle hip check that turns a push into a pivot. The two collide softly, a clumsy dance step nobody needs to see twice. They curse, offended at physics, not the man who obeyed it. From the doorway, Ms. Ortega watches the corridor through chapel glass. Her hand hovers near the radio on her belt. She feels pride sit where fear used to live. "Move them," Cade tells his men, voice low. "The stair." Elias bows his head a fraction to the altar he cannot see and steps into the line that leads out. The crew parts, not wide, not happy, but in safer geometry. As they pass the fallen knife, Noah kicks it under a pew. The antechamber spits them into the stairwell, breath cool, walls close, handrail oiled by years of palms. Above, footsteps arrange themselves into audience. Below, metal answers metal in the kitchen. The light loses its color here. It is plain, and says what happens now will be written in clear ink. Noah looks to Elias. Elias nods once. The fight will be measured, not performed. The line has begun to sing, and he intends to keep it on key. The stairwell narrows thought. A bulb overhead flickers. Southline waits on the steps. One at the landing, two above, one below. Elias lays his right palm on the rail, not gripping, just listening. "Down or up?" the landing man says. "You pass us." "With care," Elias answers. The first rush comes from above, a shoulder meant to turn the stair into a chute. Elias cuts the angle at 45, letting the man's own force meet the brass rail, a lesson that bruises without breaking. The next attacks are a blur of greed and poor angles. One aims for his throat, another for Noah's hoodie. Elias answers with short kin-na and small circles, turning speed past balance. Wrists are levered, grips opened. He keeps Noah tucked behind his lead shoulder. "Feet under you," he says. "Hold the rail with your breath." From below, Cade's voice thins. "Move them." A methodical guard aims to scoop and dump. Elias answers with structure, emptying the lift and parking the man on a bench. Another runner vaults up 3 steps. Elias posts a hand on the rail, a step higher. A fixed point the man didn't count on. Shin meets bar. Momentum pivots. Embarrassment is louder than pain. "Pinch them," Cade orders. 2 converge, 1 above, 1 below, a classic press. Elias makes the stair choose. He slides to the rail side and keeps his palm on brass, giving himself a 3rd leg the others ignore. The upper man reaches. Elias cuts the angle again and shapes his hands to receive the arm. Elbow turned toward the void, forearm toward the wall. A controlled spiral turns shoulders without tearing them and feeds the man into the landing rail like it was his idea. Below, the second misreads timing and eats his partner's heel. Momentum and gravity nod at each other and move on. The bulb stutters, then decides. White steadies along the rail, a line of light from landing to landing. Noah's fear has thinned into attention. He mirrors the stance by inches, front foot settled, back foot hinged, spine long. He does not fight. He refuses the invitation to be thrown. A hook comes for the tray, the symbol bothering the guard more than he can say. Elias lets the hook pass through air, lifts the tray a finger's width so the hand finds nothing, then shelves it back with library care. His free hand rests on the man's forearm, above the wrist, below the elbow, and sets it to the rail. Not pinning, not hurting, only stopping. Pain is optional. The man declines. "Down," Cade says at last, deciding the stair isn't winning fast enough. "Kitchen's waiting." They move as a pair, Elias half a tread ahead, Noah behind the shoulder he trusts. Eyes test, fights don't. The echo changes its job. It records decisions instead of threats. Shoes make cleaner sounds when they are not trying to shout. At the last turn, desperation tries once more. A young Southline swings a forearm like a gate. Elias meets it with 2 soft palms, shaped like a frame, and walks the frame 1 step backward. The swing loses purpose. The boy's breath stalls. Elias tips his chin, an elder's nod that says, "Learn this and you will fall less." Anger and shame rise and then decide to wait for a better day. The boy steps aside. Noah glances at the rail, then at Elias's hand. "It really is a 3rd leg," he murmurs. "It keeps your story from slipping," Elias says. The air below is warmer. Metal speaks from the kitchen line. Cade's silhouette waits at the base of the stairs, counting bodies, counting time, still believing in the stage he arranged. Elias checks the tray's balance, then steps off the final tread onto the flat. He does not look triumphant. He looks intact, which is harder. Behind them, the bulb that could not choose now shines without argument. The rail holds its ruler straight light. Gravity minds its manners, and the stairwell, score kept and tempers measured, releases them to the next test waiting in steel and steam. The stairwell exhales them into the main corridor. Heat rides low along the floor. Trays knock metal in clipped syllables. Voices stack and sway toward the kitchen mouth like water downhill. Southline is already at work. Runners on corners, watchers where the hall bends. A cardboard box sits near the chapel door, not quite in the way, not quite out of it. No one points at it. The box points at everyone. Noah keeps half a step behind. They'll make the corridor decide. "Corridors like decisions," Elias says, tray upright, edge to thigh. Lieutenant Damon Carver appears. uniform squared, radio angled at his jaw. He clocks the box, the watchers, the swell at the kitchen mouth, and the old man whose pace refuses to hurry. He keys the radio. No alarm. A forecast. Top of the hour. Hold side doors, close cross traffic. Double-click reply. Far off, locks bite. The corridor narrows without moving its walls. News travels like heat. Side doors held. Cross traffic closed. And a name moves with it. Anvil. No one sees Rex Mercer yet. That's how he enters. After the room tells itself it belongs to him. Cade Sutter materializes near the commissary window with 2 lieutenants. "Keep it flowing," he says, pleasant. "No bumps. Witnesses where they can see." Runners take positions that matter for sight lines. The hallway becomes 3 lanes. Through traffic, watchers, and those who will be watched. Elias doesn't adjust to the crowd adjusts to him. A half step here, a breath there, a shoulder choosing not to touch. Noah feels the change. "You're moving them." "They are moving," Elias says. "I'm giving them away." Camera bubbles cast pale halos on tile. At the far end, Ms. Ortega steers 2 stragglers away from the funnel, radio in hand, thumb near the button but not on it. Intervene when harm outruns order. For now, watch the pace of harm. Carver posts at the chapel kitchen intersection, visible enough to be read, not enough to be blamed. He widens a pinch with 2 quiet steps. A guard mirrors him. Choreography labeled nothing to see. Cade drifts close enough to be heard without raising his voice. "Line's a choir," he says. "Pitch follows breath," Elias answers. Cade smiles. "Let's see." Rumor returns. "Anvil at the turn. Second post." The corridor straightens the way a congregation does at prelude. Some men make space without admitting it. A service cart squeals. Steam breathes around its wheels. The clock above the glass clicks a minute, small and sovereign. Cade tilts his chin, 1 witness by the ice machine, 1 at the glass, 1 on the edge of kitchen light. The aisle looks accidental. It isn't. Elias steps into that seam as if it were taped for him. Noah fits behind, a page following a line he can finally read. Carver's radio hisses. "Side doors held." "Copy." He pockets it. He will be where witnesses can find him and excuses cannot. Noah glances at the glow. This is where it gets loud. "It can be loud and still listen," Elias says. The corridor, pinched and guided, empties into the mouth of the kitchen line. Steam climbs the wall and writes new weather. Hot, bright, full of eyes. The hour gathers. The room is ready to decide whom it belongs to. Elias walks into that decision with a tray that refuses to wobble, a pace that declines to argue, and a boy at his shoulder who, without counting, breathes in time with a man who has taught rooms how to listen. The kitchen corridor tightens into a single mouth of stainless and steam. Cade sets the space like a conductor. Runners at corners, lookouts by the ice machine, 3 witnesses spaced like punctuation. The crowd thickens until the hallway breathes as one body. Stakes repeat without speech, not life and death, but dignity and order. Elias steps into the seam with the tray upright, edge to his thigh, a small horizon in one hand. Noah keeps 1 pace behind, letting the old man's tempo become his own. The serving line blinks with heat. A clock clicks the hour that turns rumor into event. Cade's smile stays polite. "On pitch, gentlemen," he says, and the line ripples as if a note were struck. 2 south line shoulders drift close to Elias, testing angle, testing consent. Consent is not given. The first leans to claim space. Elias shifts half a shoe, places the tray aside, and lets the man's chest meet empty distance. A palm rests on the deltoid. Light, not push, while the other hand turns the wrist a quarter. The message is clear. Stand there. Not here. The man finds himself where he was told. The second tries for the tray. Elias lifts it a finger's width, so the grab closes on air. He shelves the tray and cups the forearm against his own, elbow toward the wall, hand toward the light. Bones prefer their lanes. Breath returns to the room. Noah lets his shoulders drop. Fear loosens into attention. Behind them, the queue compresses. South line moves a pair forward to box the seam. A young one peels toward Noah, jaw tight. Elias answers first. A small circle takes the reaching wrist. A sidestep gives the arm somewhere harmless to go. Hands to yourself, he says, voice even enough to be borrowed. The boy studies his own hand. An elbow rises near Elias's ear. He meets it with the back of his wrist, lets it roll into air, and sets the elbow on the counter edge like a cup that should not fall. The owner chooses not to continue. A tray bumps from behind. Elias steps with it, borrowing its shove to slide 2 inches and make room where room insisted there was none. Noise presses, meaning does not retreat. Noah whispers, "They want you to swing." "They want a story they understand," Elias says. "We'll give them one they can live with." South line's left flank tries a shoulder chain. 3 men, small nudges, building wave. Elias leans a hip into the rail, angles his stance, and sets a palm at the chain's hinge. The wave empties along the counter without finding shore. "Last warning," says a voice pretending to be official. Cade nods to the corner, and a runner slips out to fetch the final piece of theater. Rex, Anvil Mercer, arrives as a temperature. He takes the second post without hurry, gives the room 2 breaths to measure him, then walks the aisle like a signature. No shoulder touches him. He stops in front of Elias and smiles without amusement. "Nice tray," he says. "It's level," Elias answers. "You keep it level when it falls?" Rex asks. "I let it teach," Elias says. Rex turns 3 degrees, changing everyone's math. "You're standing on our breath," he says softly. "I'm standing where breath becomes voice," Elias says. Rex feints for the tray, then for Noah, then for neither. Elias's hands do nearly nothing. One lifts, one turns, one settles. A knuckle is pressed, a shoulder redirected, a shoe invited to stand where the floor means it to stand. Nothing dramatic happens. The drama is that nothing happens. Cade checks the witnesses. They nod. Rex weighs speed against risk and shrugs as if discarding a coat no one can see. "Kitchen sings," he says. "Carry harmony." "We'll keep pitch," Elias answers. The line breathes again. Trays advance. Noah watches the ladle rise and fall and finds his pulse becoming ordinary again. Steam lifts. Steel answers. A clock moves a minute with a small sovereign click, and the promise sits, quiet but certain. The next exchange will be the one men whisper about for years, when a tray, a breath, and a room decided who truly owned the line. The line runs hot and bright. A river of trays sliding toward steel. Elias steps into the open space as if it were drawn for him. The tray rests upright to his thigh, a small horizon he refuses to tilt. Rex Anvil. Mercer faces him with the ease of a man who's never had to explain himself. Steam lifts, voices fall, stakes surface without shouting. Not life and death, but dignity and order. Who writes the breath of the room? "You slowed my hour," Rex says, conversational. "I steadied it," Elias answers. "Steel likes noise. Steel likes truth." A first test, almost polite. A runner reaches for the tray, hoping to take the symbol instead of the man. Elias raises the rim a finger's width. The grasp closes on air. The tray shelves back with library care. The runner's hand floats, embarrassed by its own purpose, and withdraws. The room listens harder. Heat hisses. A clock advances by a single sovereign tick. Second test, heavier. A body angles at Elias's hip, trying to turn his back to the line. He cuts 45, lets force miss its story, and guides it into stainless where metal tells the truth. Hip meets counter. Pride earns a bruise. The man stays upright because Elias leaves him that dignity. Rex watches without blinking, as if taking attendance. Third test arrives as a chord, one high, one low. Elias answers in measures, not muscle. Bridge hand receives the high forearm, rolls it into air. Small circle collects the low wrist and gives it a harmless lane. Momentum meets itself and dissolves. The attackers pause, uninjured, recalculating what victory sounds like when it doesn't break anything. Trays resume their quiet slide. A ladle coughs. Breaths return to noses instead of throats. A glint rises. Not a knife, a kitchen fork, kept flat to hide its voice. The wrist lifts. Elias turns the hinge, not the door. Thumb to the wrist's web, elbow steered a half-inch. Ding. Tines kiss the tray and sing. The sound travels farther than threats. The fork teeters, then skates to the rubber mat. The man who drew it freezes, eyes tilting to Rex as if awaiting fresh orders that never arrive. He steps back, empty-handed, learning how a silence can outweigh a blade. Noise tries again anyway. A shove lands between Elias's shoulder blades. He borrows it for the step he was already going to take. A clamp grips his deltoid. He seats the joint with 2 fingers and a breath, turning the clamp into a rest. Stand, he says even, and the hand obeys because insisting would cost more than pausing. Behind him, Noah's breathing lowers from fear into attention. He matches the old man's stance by inches. Front foot settled, back foot hinged, spine long. Rex shifts 3 degrees and changes the math of the room. He steps close enough to measure breath, touches the tray with a testing finger, and tries to make it a metronome he controls. Elias declines both extremes. Too much weight, too little, returning what arrives, gram for gram, keeping the horizon level. A shoulder leans from Rex's left. Elias turns it a degree and returns it uninjured. A knee bumps his shin. He answers with posture, and the knee forgets its assignment. Arrangement phrase. 3 surge on impulse. 1 for the tray, 1 for Noah, 1 to swallow space. Elias refuses all 3 with the smallest true things he knows. He tilts the rim so a hand grabs nothing. He turns a wrist with a breath and 2 knuckles. He steps half a shoe aside so the third man collides with absence and learns about emptiness the way a student learns gravity. The crowd's volume drops on instinct. Kitchens love efficiency. Rex's eyes narrow, not with humiliation, but interest. What if I don't stop? He asks, voice soft enough to lend. You stop later, Elias says, with more to fix. Rex calculates. His power has always looked like order. If he buys spectacle and loses control, the hymnal scatters, and men he doesn't trust start singing lead. Still, pride wants proof. He flicks 2 fingers. 2 of his cleanest arrive crisp. Elias meets crisp with clean. Bridge, circle, set. 1 shoulder parks safely against the counter. 1 forearm rests along the tray, paused, not pinned. Neither man is injured. Both are finished. Trays move. Steam writes its alphabet on the ceiling. Rex taps the tray with a knuckle. Ding, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Steel sings, he says. When it's held right, Elias answers. They stand inside that held note, a silence wide enough to be shared. The room's temperature drops a degree. Men straighten shirts because dignity is contagious. Noah exhales something he didn't know he was carrying and looks at the old man the way you look at a map that finally matches the road. Somewhere in the back, not loudly but permanently, someone says, "Discipline beats violence," and the sentence decides to belong to the place. Rex nods once, a decision disguised as courtesy. "Serve him," he tells the server as if this were always about food. Rice falls like weather. The tray that refused to wobble receives its portion without spilling a grain. Elias inclines his head, a thank you to the worker, not the throne. He shifts one pace. The line flows forward, not faster, just inevitable. At the edge of sight, a single thumb eases off a radio button. Not carelessness, acknowledgement. From her angle, a teacher recognizes a classroom she does not have to save today. Across the stainless, a quiet professional, no advocate, no enemy, widens a narrow pinch by 2 steps and lets it look like nothing. The room borrows these small mercies and spends them on order. Rex remains where he is, listening to what he has not lost. He has witnesses, yes, but also math. The cost of pushing a story that refuses the ending he wants. He measures Elias like a man measures a bridge, load, sway, centerline, and here's what he didn't expect to hear: stability. "Keep pitch," he says at last. "We will," Elias answers, and means everyone within earshot. The steel hums. The hour steadies. Men collect their trays and their faces. Heat resumes its work. And under the ordinary clatter runs a current you can feel more than name. One last reckoning, cleaner and higher, waits just beyond the steam. It's an ending sharp enough to be whispered about for years, when Redstone remembers the day a tray taught the kitchen what music discipline makes. The hour doesn't shout. It arrives like a held breath, finding shape. The kitchen hum steadies. The line runs true. Then the crowd opens a seam, as if the room itself wants the outcome clear. Rex Mercer steps into that seam one last time. He is weight and will. A man who has ended 100 arguments by reminding them what he weighs. Elias meets him with the tray upright at his thigh, edge resting to keep the horizon honest. Noah stays close enough to hear, far enough to learn. "You wrote a new hour," Rex says. "I reminded it of the old one," Elias answers. "Anvil falls, steel learns." "Anvil falls," Elias says, "or it is placed." Courtesy paid, proof offered. Rex steps into range, feet square, center heavy, and throws the thing that named him, a short hammer of a forearm meant to crush breath and fold stance. Elias does not step back. He roots the center line, knees soft, hips stacked, and lets the force arrive on the back of a wrist shaped like a bridge. The forearm rides up and away. The hammer finds air. Rex recovers and notes the math. A second swing comes from the other side, tighter. Elias is already inside. Palm to triceps, palm to shoulder blade, borrow the shove, give it to stainless. Ribs meet counter. A bruise is paid. Elias's free hand rests at the collarbone the way a teacher rests chalk. Rex goes low at the hips to scoop and lift, to write new gravity. Elias answers with structure, not speed. Back foot hinge, front door closed, tray level. The lift empties, the scoop argues with air, and air refuses. They reset without stepping apart. The crowd keeps silence like an oath. Rex reaches for the tray to tilt the room. Elias seats the joint above the wrist, turns a knuckle, and the hand finds stillness against the edge. Not pinning, not hurting, only stopping. Noah whispers, "He can't move you." "I'm not the thing he's trying to move," Elias says. Rex smiles for the first time. You fight air. I fight men. I fight the story, Elias says. Men are in it. Rex steps in tighter, chest to tray, head to head. Pressure wants an answer. Elias gives rooting, breath lowered, tailbone heavy, feet quiet, spine long. The tray does not tremble. Steel hums. Rex tries a clinch, hands lacing behind the old man's back. Elias's elbows live near the ribs, points in. He threads one arm, finds the wrist with 2 fingers, and turns a kinna a half-inch. Shoulders confess to structure. The clinch opens because joints prefer honesty. Rex pivots hip to hip, driving a tight shove to make the old man stumble into witnesses. Elias answers with angle, not feet. He turns 45, keeps the tray between them, and lets Rex meet his own momentum. They arrive at the counter together. Rex's palm slaps stainless. Elias's palm settles beside it. Again, Rex says. Again, Elias agrees. The third exchange carries the weight of names. Rex brings the forearm down like a stamp meant to end debate. Elias meets it with the bridge, turns the hinge, and sends the stamp to blank paper. In the same breath, he parks the tray flat on the counter, edge square, center true. The sound is unremarkable and absolute. A tray set square in steam is a gavel of steel. Silence happens. Agreement. Rex chooses a last clean test. No feint, no shove. He places both hands on the tray's rim, eyes on Elias. Center line, he says. Rooted, the old man answers. Rex presses. Elias does not press back. He allows what is given and returns only what remains. The tray does not tilt. The room does. Rex keeps his hands there a heartbeat, flat, public, then taps twice, small and clear, a craftsman's yield. He removes his hands and steps half aside, palm open, inviting the old man forward first. Then, for the room to hear, Rex says, "Stand down." The hour holds. The sentence lands like a rule. Southline relaxes without slumping. Witnesses see not a man undone, but a man conceding measure. "Feed him," Rex tells the server. "Feed the kid." The ladle pours weather. Rice lands like a treaty. The line breathes. Noah exhales and looks at Elias like a map finally matching the road. "Sir, you kept the class." "The class kept itself," Elias says. "We reminded it how." Somewhere beyond the steel, a teacher pockets a radio she no longer needs. Not relief, recognition. A quiet professional shifts 2 steps to widen a pinch and lets it look like nothing. Small mercies spend themselves on order. Rex lingers a step, the way a craftsman checks a joint. He looks at Elias like a bridge he didn't build but must cross. "You changed the hour," he says. "We changed it," Elias says. "You heard it." Rex gives a short laugh. His face stays level. He moves aside, not retreating, aligning. The corridor opens. Not wide, just right. The line flows around consent. Elias picks up the tray, sets it upright to his thigh, and takes a breath that lends itself to everyone. He steps forward with Noah at his shoulder. The server scoops beans with care. Men let them pass in the wake of a steady thing. As they clear the station, the hum of steel resolves into music. Redstone will remember the sound. A tray set square, an anvil placed, a room that chose to hold rather than hit. The hour isn't over. It is balanced, for now. By evening count, a note will climb up the chain. By morning, a memo might sketch mats where noise used to stand. And if one more test comes, cleaner and quieter, it will arrive where steel cannot sing, an echo chamber that judges only stance. When it does, the old man will still hold level, and the room will already know what that means. The room holds its breath. Lieutenant Damon Carver's report climbs the chain with 3 lines that matter. Education wing, order restored without force. Kitchen line, de-escalation led by Inmate Porter. Recommend pilot, discipline training. By noon, Warden Whitaker signs. Discipline training pilot, volunteer cohort, breathing and restraint techniques, report weekly. Paper moves Redstone. By afternoon, the wing remembers itself. Lights hold. Chalk dusts the board. The door sighs. Elias enters without announcement, tray traded for a spiral notebook. He sets it square on the desk. Noah waits at the threshold, trying to look patient. "Sir," he says, "can I learn the breathing?" "You can," Elias says. "Ask a better question." "What's the question?" Noah asks. "What do you want to do with the breath you keep?" Noah thinks longer than usual. "I want to keep from breaking things I don't mean to break." "Better," Elias says. "Then we start with posture, not lungs. Posture holds choices. Breath follows posture." He sets Noah near the back, feet under hips, knees soft. "Count if you must," Elias says, "but let numbers be scaffolding." Ms. Ortega brings printouts, adds, "Observers welcome, notes, not judgments," and watches from the hall. Carver steps in with the memo. "Pilot's live." Noah glances sideways. "Can I ask the other question?" "You can." "Why are you here?" Elias keeps his gaze on the whiteboard line. "Wire fraud," he says. "Cross-state transfers to keep a roof over a boy who needed one. Money crossed lines. The law followed." "Federal time," Noah says. "Federal time," Elias agrees. "I turned myself in when the math looked like I'd traded one roof for another." "Why Redstone?" "Because it is where they sent me," Elias says. "Sometimes the right classroom resists." Noah's shoulders loosen. Vents hum. Lights hold. Word of the pilot moves faster than the memo. Men who pretend not to care read twice. A young South Line signs. A kitchen worker asks about overtime. Ortega says no. He signs anyway. Elias walks the rows, correcting wrist, not fist, foot width, not bravado. "Discipline," he says once so the word has a place to sit, "is strength you choose to lend." The hour edges toward count. The memo hasn't made saints, it made a better room. A guard appears with a new intake in tow, paperwork folded like a flag. The man is older, eyes clear, stopping at the threshold. "Name?" Ortega asks. "Dalton," he says. "People called me Rust." Carver reads the page. Name on the board. "Heard of you?" he says, not unfriendly. "Accord New Branch?" "Something like that," Dalton says. "It's starting without me." He looks at Elias's hands, not his face. Respect recognizes center before features. "I came to learn the one where the room breathes." "Right hour," Elias says. Noah smiles without moving. The pilot has a whisper of a waiting list. Count is called. Papers stack. Chairs speak softly. At the door, Ortega lifts a palm toward the camera and lowers it. Nothing to fix yet. Carver pins the memo. Elias gathers the notebook. Same time after chow, he tells Noah. "Bring better questions." "Yes, sir," Noah says. On the last beat, Dalton speaks low. "Tell your warden his pilot needs more mats." "He'll read it in the notes," Carver says. "He'll feel it sooner," Dalton says, and walks into the brighter corridor without raising his eyes. The wing holds its small weather. Chalk dust drifts like a gentle verdict. Men pass the board and keep their shoulders where shoulders belong. Somewhere in the kitchen, steel hums the same note it learned yesterday and intends to keep. "Subscribe to JusticeSoul for the next hour," it says, warm, firm, where dignity fights without fists and wins.